You are listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with Rob Reed and Josh Galicki, bringing together the love of nature and photography. Episode 34. We discuss shooting in the spring. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with me, Rob Reed, and my co-host, Josh Galicki. Josh, it seems like ages since we've spoken. How's it going?
It feels like ages, Rob. It's going well. It's going well. Just been busy out shooting as much as I can. The past couple months, it's the busiest time of year when it comes to subjects here up in the Northeast United States. So it's been busy, but it's been good.
Yeah, well, hence the title and the subject of the podcast, I guess, the spring migration. So, what have you been concentrating on? Have you been staying sort of local? Have you done any trips? How's it sort of shaped up?
Mostly all local. Really out in my backyard here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and I visit family in Pennsylvania in May, strategically in May, because that's great for songbird migration. So mostly Maryland and Pennsylvania. And for me, spring, even though it's not spring, it really starts in February. And there's so many transition activities between different types of birds between February and now, and it'll continue to go on into early June. So there's so many different subjects, so many different things to capture. So this is the Super Bowl of photography right now, this time.
Yeah, I'm always struck by how similar the cycles are, both in the UK and in the US in terms of the weather patterns where you are and where I am, and when the migration sort of starts to kick in. Because I mean, like you, it's really February is the time when things start to come out of their dormant state, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So not only are we talking about birds, we're talking about plants and insects and all this sort of stuff there, and reptiles and amphibians. They all start sort of waking up, and that sort of, I don't know, start to get ready for the next, for the next season. You can see it happens quite quickly. Those daylight hours start extending quite rapidly, and it's at that point towards the end of February, I'd say, when things really start to get going. But by the time you get to this point, and we're recording this, what's sort of middle of May, we're really into it.
Mm-hmm.
Really into it. And I've just been away. I was away last week on Anglesey, which is, for those of you who don't know the UK terribly well, it's it's an island on the sort of northwest corner of Wales, which is the sort of closest point to Ireland. So that's where all the ferries go to Dublin, basically. But it's an amazing place for birds, particularly at this time of the year. It's got a really good mixture of habitat, from sort of steep coastal cliffs to sort of heathlands and woodland areas and coastal lagoons. So in particular, I wanted to go to somewhere called South Stack, which is coastal cliffs. So there's lots of breeding seabirds like razorbills and guillemots and puffins. And there's also a really lovely coastal lagoon somewhere called Kemlyn, which is probably the best tern colony, I would think, in the UK that you can visit without getting on a boat. So you've got them flying. You've got this sort of shingle beach between the lagoon and the bay in which they fish. So they're literally flying straight over your head, dozens of them at a time.
Or at your head, I suspect sometimes.
Well, no, they do tend to avoid you, but yeah. Depends where you stand.
Our Arctic terns, whenever we're near them, or even same, I think, when I was with Alaska and a few other places, but they dive bomb you, kind of like Jaegers and skuas. They have.
Yeah, well, they do. If they at this point you can't get close to their nests, which is really the reason they do it.
Yeah,
is to protect their nesting sites. But at Kemlyn, there's a rope which stops people from going too far. And the lagoon is set back off the shingle beach a fair distance. So
okay. So you're not close to
that. You haven't got that interaction. They'll fly straight over your head, and the only reason they're going to and fro, obviously, is because they're fishing. So, but it gives you loads of opportunities to capture them against blue sky backgrounds. Again, in my case, directly against the sun, because that's the sort of stuff I like to experiment with. So yeah, it's just great. I can't think of a better place to photograph, certainly sandwich tern, because they're in such good numbers there.
We
But you
have
also,
those. They're beautiful. They have
ah,
the little yellow paint almost at the end of
yeah,
their bill.
at
It
the
looks
end of,
like
yeah,
they're stunning.
exactly. So they've got a dark bill and this sort of orange yellow tip to it, which is very distinctive.
Yeah.
So they're good fun, and Arctic, common, and occasionally roseate as well. You get maybe a couple of
Oh,
pairs
that's
of
a great
those.
bird too. We have
So
those, the roseate terns.
yeah,
They're very white. I think probably the whitest in terms of the other terns. You know, they've got
I
bright white.
didn't see any when I was there. I was told by the warden that there were a couple that had arrived one morning when I was there, but I didn't see them. So,
Mm,
but you know how, I don't know about you, but it's I love terns,
me too.
but
I
if
even
you
love
can't,
gulls, Rob.
yeah, if you can't, yeah, if you can't photograph them sort of on the ground close to the nest, and at Kemlin you can't, because I told you there's this distance between. You can only really photograph them in flight, and after a while, there's only so many ways you can
Yeah,
photograph a tern in flight, particularly against the blue sky.
yeah.
But I found myself taking thousands and thousands of pictures and filling my cards up, and then just deleting them all because you just all this not all the
Well,
same.
like with any bird, if you're, holding the hammer down and they're in flight, there's only so many wing positions and looks
Mm,
that you get, just how the bird is postured, wing up, wing down, and everything else.
mm.
The only time you can get really unique stuff is, and I've done this before, where if I've been on a few islands where you walk by and it's okay, you're with, the guide is walking you through or whatever, and you're walking by a colony, a breeding colony. So they'll come and attack you. So you can get wide angle pictures of them dive bombing you and moving around, turns that is. So that, other than that, it's very difficult. It's very difficult, I think, to get a unique flight shot with these guys, unless when
Yeah,
they fight too. Sometimes you'll see
yeah,
the
you
turn.
can do that on the Farne Islands. So that's the place they do it in the UK, where literally you get off the boat and you are into their sort of nesting area. So they will come. I mean, I've seen plenty of pictures in Bird Photographer of the Year, for example, when we did that.
Yeah,
Um, Plenty of pictures, literally, of terns inches from people's heads, dive bombing them, and
yeah,
you do have to wear a hat.
yeah, definitely. Most people, they taught me this. I didn't realize it's a smart thing. They tell you to hold your fist up in the air, and they'll go for your fist versus your face.
Yeah, you don't want a tern's beak in your face.
Yeah, this is true. But yeah, and I a lot of people did that, and they go for the highest point on the body. So that
Yeah,
they weren't
interesting.
photographing those. So I'm like, come on, get closer. I've got my
Yeah.
24 millimeter out.
So I've seen lots of wide angle shots of them in that sort of Angel of the North type posture,
Mhm.
with the wings outspread, and they're going a bit nuts because they're trying to protect the nest. But the stuff I was doing, I wanted that sort of that shot from directly underneath. I
Yeah,
wanted, and I got it against the clear blue sky and that lovely. I mean, the plumage is so dainty looking, isn't it? It's just
especially the
elegant.
tail feathers too.
Yeah,
The each, what I guess it would be the outer feather on each. It's longer.
yeah.
They'll have, some of them will
The
have those
primaries, yeah,
strand.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, they're just an amazing looking bird. I mean, they're not complicated in terms of their coloration, obviously, but there's something very delicate and elegant about them, which is appealing. So I got them with sand eels coming in, obviously, where they were fishing, and I got them from underneath. And then the light starts getting a bit harsh, and so I tried photographing them directly against the sun, so really overexposing. And I've got a couple of shots where they're almost disappearing and the whole frame is pretty much white.
Mm,
But then you get this,
Bill.
because you're shooting directly into the sun, you're getting this sort of light diffraction, which is picked up on their plumage. So you getting the shades of the rainbow going through their plumage, just subtle. It's
Oh,
not,
that's cool.
which actually was pretty cool. So
Yeah.
I got one or two shots which worked quite well that way, which I was pleased with. But yeah, other than that, as you say, I was going through all these pictures and I'm going, these wing sequences are all the same,
Yeah.
because as you say, if you're shooting 20 frames a second, you're picking up every sequence of them in flight, and it's just a repeat, repeat, repeat. So yeah,
They hang out on the pier here behind the house. I'll get least turn. What do I get? Forster's turn, common turn, least turn, and then royal turns and Caspian turns when they're coming in and out.
wow.
Caspians in the spring, royals later in the fall, more like it. But they are a lot of fun to shoot. But they get much more respect than the gulls do. So, I mean, people just treat terns differently than gulls, maybe because they don't come after the French fries as much. I don't know, but gulls, I think, are in some ways equally as pretty. Over here, the most popular tern that we have is definitely by far, and you would know this from Bird Photographer of the Year too, because it's photographed a lot, the black skimmer.
Yeah.
It's a unique bird.
Yeah.
It's got color in it. It's not just all white. Most people don't see it as a plain bird, and it's a unique.
It's the way it fishes, isn't it? I mean, that's and that's that head-on shot with a lower mandible, running through the water. That's what people want, because they fish in a really unique way, don't they? They'll fly along with their lower mandible in the water, trailing in the water, and when they hit a fish, it snaps shut, and that's the way they do it.
Yeah, and from what I understand, a lot of these birds, their mandibles break, and they just continue doing it, and they're able to survive, from what I understand.
Wow.
But it is cool when you see it. It never gets old, because it's, especially when there's calm water and you have nice light, and whether it's a silhouette or even if they're head on, and you see the the contrail of the water and they're going through. It's cool behavior. No other tern does that.
No, that would be. I'd love to do that. Actually, I'd love to photograph that sequence.
They're all over on the coastline here. I don't have them on the bay. They're not around my place, but I wish they were.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic bird. The other thing there's a shout out to a guy I met actually at Kemlin Bay when I was doing the turns. This other photographer just turned up and we got chatting. A chap called Dave from Manchester. So if he listens, he'll know who he is. So we got chatting, and he started talking about sand martins, which I've never photographed before because I've just never really had the opportunity, or a decent opportunity. And he was telling me, oh yeah, we just walk along the coast here for about half a mile along the cliffs, and there's a sandy cliff, and they're all nesting in there, and they're flying along the cliff edge, and you can take pictures of them. So actually we walked there together, and he showed me, and it was getting on a bit in the morning by this point, so the light wasn't the best, but it was incredible numbers of sand martins, and they were literally flying along. You could walk along the cliff edge and they're flying along feet in front of you, just messing around, flying up in air in groups. I don't know if you ever tried to, well, you've obviously tried to photograph flying hirundines before, but they are so difficult.
They are
so difficult, even when they're being held up slightly by the wind on the cliff edge. But to try and track them through the autofocus, they're such a small bird. It was, you had to have a bit of patience. That is for sure.
Yeah, most people, I think they'll try to photograph those types of birds, the really small, fast ones, when they're taking off or when they're landing, right? Or when they know they're going to launch, and to get them mid-flight is pretty difficult.
Yeah, well, you see, we couldn't do that because the nesting site was below our feet over the ledge, so we couldn't really see them. And so the only chance we had was to, grab focus as they're in mid-flight, which is just almost impossible. But did manage it a few times. But it's always good when you do this, when you go somewhere and you experience something, you take some pictures, you go back, review the results, and then you think, how can I do that differently to get a different result? Because if I go back and do the same thing, I'm just going to come away with the same pictures and the same frustrations. I know I can do something better. So I thought I will go back and have another go. So a couple of days later, I went back, because the backgrounds are really nice. You get, really nice blue sea, because the weather we had that week was amazing. Blue skies, sunshine all week, which is very unusual for the UK. But you got this really nice blue sky, blue sea background, and the beach was quite pebbly and rocky. So you also had that sort of mix, that nice textured mix in the background. It was obviously out of focus, but those textures were coming through. So I thought this really is a great opportunity to try and get a really good shot of one in flight, but I've got to do it in a different way. If I sit here and try and track them with the autofocus, as I said, I'm just going to get the same thing again, and I'm going to get frustrated. So I sat and watched them for a while, and they were coming really close to the edge, and they were coming to the same spots, and they were coming in groups. So in the end, what I decided I would do is manually focus on a spot, widen the widen the zoom to 180 as opposed to trying to get it at 600.
Hmm.
Focus much closer, so wait for them to come to that, and just sit there and wait. And just every time they came into frame, I would just hit the shutter and fire off that 20 frames a second, hoping that eventually I would get one in the right focal plane, doing the right thing. And of course, because the light was really good, I could, not only using that slightly wider angle meant the depth of field was better, I could also up the aperture a little bit to sort of f9 to try and give myself the best chance of getting something in that focal plane. And anyway, long story short, after quite a few frames that obviously had to end up with a delete treatment, I eventually got a couple that I'm actually quite pleased with.
Oh, great.
So I didn't have my eye on the viewfinder. I just waited for them, looked
That's
at the
smart.
scene, and just hit the shutter every time I thought they were coming in, into the view of focus of the camera. So
Hmm.
yeah, and doing it that way, I said I got a couple of reasonable pictures, and I think if I had more time and I went and did it again, I'd be able to improve again. So it was just that whole process of thinking outside of the box and trying to do something a little different got me a better shot, so I came away quite pleased.
Yeah, and being in a situation like that where you can return and go back and you know the behavior, you know the birds, you know what's going to transpire for the most part, that helps you plan and figure things out, which isn't always the case, I think, when it comes to spring migration and shooting over these past couple months, because so many things are transitory for the most part. And that's one of the challenges that I find, whether it's, again, I always say things start in late February and they kind of move through early June. But there's a lot of sequences that I'll come across. If I'm not able to capture something that I want at that moment, I'm not going to be able to come back to it because the birds
It's not
in
going
this
to be
case
there.
are gone. Yeah, they're gone.
Yeah.
They're moving through. So you always have to expect the unexpected in a way, and you always have to try to be ready and be able to capture whatever nature's going to hand your way, because sometimes it's really hard to predict what's going to show up, and that's always a little bit of a challenge. I mean, overall, I can predict what I expect to see. Like in late February is a good example. That's where a lot of our regional migrants come back. To me, spring in the Northeast United States, in the Mid-Atlantic, I'll say, it really kicks off, Rob, when we get red-winged blackbirds come back on territory. They'll show up and they start singing. American robins will start moving through. They'll congregate. They're the earliest migrants that I start to see. And then a couple weeks later, we'll get some influx of pine warblers and some other types of songbirds that migrate not from South America or Central America, but further south. But then you have ducks moving through, you have swans moving through, all kind of waterfowl are starting to move through in March. And there's so many great opportunities to photograph them. And then as you get through March and then you get into April, as most of the waterfowl move out, owls are all gone, they're moving out. And then you start to get, the dribs and drabs of different songbirds. And these are the ones coming from Central America, South America. And then by the end of April, early May, the floodgates are really open. And then now we're in a transition where I've been photographing songbirds for the past couple of weeks. Now we're getting large flocks of shorebirds showing up. That's the red knots, all different types of sandpipers, yellow legs, willets, all that stuff. They're all moving up, and ruddy turnstones. They're moving through. Memorial Day weekend, which is the long weekend that's coming up here this upcoming weekend, that's huge for shorebirds. And then it'll go right into early June. It's interesting how it transitions. It's regional migrants, waterfowl, songbirds, shorebirds. That's kind of the timeline here.
Well, I mean, and you being on the coast as well, I mean,
it helps
amplified, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because we're in the Atlantic Flyway. I'm on the bay, so we still get a lot of stuff go through. But there's the Mississippi Flyway, Atlantic Flyway, and then there's the Pacific Flyway. I believe those are the major flyways. And then you have some smaller areas too, where birds will follow rivers and certain species will go through certain areas.
I do love these seasons of transition where, some species disappear, and they go off to their breeding grounds, mainly from here, be Scandinavia and further north. And then and they're replaced by warblers and all those sorts of things. I do like that. I like the familiarity of things like Chiff Chaff turning
Mm.
up, with
I love
that
that
sort of,
song, by the way, too.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's that distinctive call, which actually by June I get really fed up with because it's quite annoying.
It's almost like a clock in a way, right? Ching. I don't know.
Chip chap, chip chap.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It reminds me of like a clock or like
yeah,
a grandfather clock telling the time at the top of the hour when it goes off.
yeah. And the one I haven't heard this year, which I think is probably I think I've heard it every year by this time, but is cuckoo.
Mm.
Last year we had one that stopped off in the wood just by the house actually for a week or so. Was calling every morning, and I did actually see it flying around one of the clearings one day when I took the dog out because I went looking for it because I could hear it calling. But I haven't heard that this year. My parents have got a house which backs onto a forest, and they have lived there for 35 years, and they have heard cuckoo from their house every year since they've been there.
Wow.
This year, I was talking to them about it only the other day. This year is the latest they've ever heard it and the furthest away they've ever heard it.
Mm.
Normally, it's very close to the garden, and I have had males flying over chasing females straight over my head when I've been in their garden before.
Wow.
But they are definitely in trouble
Mm.
because I've just this year it's very marked.
Well, speaking of reproduction for cuckoos, I don't know. I know it's this way in Central Europe, but in the cuckoo species in the UK, are they nest parasites?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
So
it's
they'll
like
go
our
for
brown-headed cowbird kind of.
yeah, they'll go for things like reed warbler, Dunnock. I think they tend to be specialists, so they'll go
Mm.
for one species, and
Interesting.
which is interesting. And they change the color of the eggs they lay to match
That's wild.
their host species.
That's wild. We
Which
have
is
two species of cuckoo, black-billed cuckoo and yellow-billed cuckoo, but they're not nest parasites. They feed on like 10 caterpillars and they're specialists and whatnot. But
yeah,
I think it's just the Eurasian species of cuckoo
yeah.
that do
There
that.
was I mean, normally they're really really difficult to photograph. There are some specialist hides and things, particularly in Scotland, where you can do it. But there was one bird, a wild bird, that used to come to a heathland in Surrey. So it's not too far from me. So about an hour and a half down the road, hour and a half down the road. And for about 4 or 5 years, I don't know whether it's probably dead now because I'm not sure how long they live, but it used to come to this clearing in this heathland environment where photographers started feeding redstarts,
Mm.
and all of a sudden this cuckoo caught on that they were feeding mealworms and everything, and it started to come down and feed on the mealworms, and it got to the point after a year or two where this thing would just turn up and feed feet from you. It would just come in, wasn't bothered by photographers at all, would come and they'd be putting all these perches in for it to sit on, and it became a real almost a sport actually. It was
Wow.
so many people there at times to photograph this thing. It became I reckon it's probably the most photographed cuckoo ever, I should say. It was I mean, it's just it was a crazy thing when you saw it just hopping around in front of you like a blackbird. This is completely nuts, and it would do it every day, pretty much, during sort of May. It was amazing. They called it they ended up calling it Colin the Cuckoo, and people in the UK, if you're into birds, they'll know. they'll know Colin the Cuckoo.
I've given names to birds that spend a season here or breed in the area just because I see them all the time. So sometimes I'll name the birds. It's interesting because a lot of migrants move through the yard, and I found this thing. It's called haiku, and what it is it's a box, and you plug in. I have it on my outside porch, and it constantly listens. And it has the Cornell lab. They have this application called Merlin. It listens to the sounds, and
And
IG.
it tracks things at night when they're flying
Yes.
over. Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
anything that vocalizes, it's got some amplified microphone in it. Anything that vocalizes, it tracks it, it records it, and there's an app, and I'm able to see exactly what's moving through. And it's crazy because, if I'm out in the yard with my camera and I'm listening, I always thought that, oh, okay, I know exactly what comes through here. I even have a count, a bird diary where I track all the species. I had no idea some of these things were passing through just because,
Yeah.
well, I'm either sleeping or I'm just not home or I'm just not listening. But it's wild, and it helps me keep track of the amount of species that are going through. Now, does it help with photography? Yeah, probably not. But at the same time, at least I have a better idea of what species are coming through and what to look for. Some years, certain species will arrive, like these are the neotropical songbirds, the migrants. Some years they'll arrive earlier, and then some years they might be a week, maybe a week and a half off where they're not there. And it depends on wind direction and everything else. But it gives you a good idea too on, if you're tracking this stuff, what the variability is. You can't always count on them showing up on the same day. Even osprey, everybody say here, osprey show up on St. Patty's Day, where, yeah, that's generally right, but it can be a week before, it could be a week after, depending upon when you first start seeing the birds. And you
Yeah.
have
I
to
mean,
be
it
ready
depends
for
on
it.
the weather patterns, right, from where they're coming from, and that will determine it to greater or lesser degree. So
Mhm.
yeah, but no, those sorts of bits of technology are amazing. I've heard about that. I mean, I know the British Trust for Ornithology, I think, you do a similar thing and collect similar data. So they obviously record the calls of stuff going over at night, and they can estimate numbers from it as well as species, which is interesting.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's amazing what you miss when you're asleep or when you can't see.
And it's sometimes easier too, like when it comes to confiding subjects, it's sometimes easier to shoot migrants because they're tired. I mean, in a way, as a photographer, you're taking advantage of a situation. A good example is like on the Delaware Bay, and I plan on doing this in the next couple of days. All these red knots and shorebirds show up, red knots, dowitchers, different types of uh, sandpipers. So you have semi-palmated and least and everything else. But anyhow, there are thousands and thousands of them, and they'll gather and they'll feed on horseshoe crab eggs. The horseshoe crabs are coming up and they're laying eggs. They normally do that in the full moon cycle. So they need to fatten up, and you could lay down there on the beach and they're walking all around you, and otherwise it'd be hard to approach some of these birds, but they're so focused on replenishing their body fat, eating, foraging, that in many cases they don't even care you're there, if you have the right field craft and technique. So it can be easy to shoot some of these migrants if you're smart about it.
Yeah. Well, why not take advantage of it, as long as
Yeah.
you're not doing anything detrimental, and that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you mentioned fieldcraft, and that's the important thing. Get that right is the key to everything, and it's like anything, isn't it? You can't go around chasing these things. You just lie down somewhere and stay quiet, and they'll come to
Yeah.
you. Normally involves getting very wet and cold.
This is true.
Miserable,
Not
but
cold this time of year.
no,
Here, bit to hell. Every kind of biting insect is starting to come to life now. We have these little things, Rob. We call them no-see-ums, and they're these small little, I mean, it's almost invisible, these little gnats, and they'll just swarm all around you and chew you up. And they're so small, they get through the netting, the
and they
mosquito
get into
net.
your hair.
Yeah.
Oh God, and into
You're
your scalp.
shooting and you're thinking you're having a nice shoot, and then it's surprise, and then you can continue shooting, but you're gonna feel a little bit of pain. So you got to work
Yeah,
for it.
exactly. And you look like you got measles or something when you're done. I mean, I've done that before. I think photographing, mainly it's in woodlands. Particularly this time of the year where
Yeah.
it gets really natty, doesn't it? And oh God, I remember photographing a woodpecker, and I was a fair distance from its nest. I was just waiting for it to come back and forth. I wasn't bothered. I was there, but oh man, did I get eaten up by those midges. And honestly, when I got back to the car, I looked in the mirror and I just thought, oh, Jesus,
I know.
I hope nobody sees me.
I hate to brag, but when it comes to like biting insects, I think we take the crown here.
Yeah.
East Coast.
Scotland. I know Scotland. That takes the
I've been
crown.
up there. It's not too bad. I mean, this is like we have.
It may, it is, I can tell you.
Yeah, I guess maybe it could be a little bit. I mean, we have no CMs, then it goes to deer flies, then we have strawberry fly, and then we have the
Oh,
greenhead
yeah.
flies. Those are the worst. they'll land on you, and they won't bite you at first. It's like, oh, and then when you get bit, it feels like a chainsaw.
Yeah, yeah. That's like the horsefly over here. They
Yeah,
got like
they're the
this
worst.
these massive mandibles, and it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
that you certainly
yeah.
know about it if you get
It
bitten
gives
by
you a
one of
little
those.
pep in your step when you
Yeah,
get bit from one of these things.
little, yeah.
I was shooting on a barrier island some years ago, and it was with a buddy of mine. He's a photographer, Sujinder, his name is, and we were photographing terns at sunrise. And it was normally there's a breeze because you're on the coast, and that keeps everything at bay. For whatever reason, there was not. It was dead still, and it was no seams and mosquitoes galore. And I guess I mean, I'll get bit, but for whatever reason, maybe he's more allergic. He came up to me, and both of his eyes were almost swollen shut, his whole
Oh,
face, the poor guy. And he said, "Hey, I think I'm getting bit." And I said, "How can you even see right now?" I'm like, "You better run to the boat and apply some DEET or something." Poor guy. I'll never forget
oh
that.
man, yeah,
But his
it can
whole face
be.
was swollen shut. I mean,
Yeah, I do remember. I do remember it was a bit of an issue when I went to Canada a few years ago. Yeah, going and shooting in those sort of woodland areas where you got the bears and the
yeah, good protein for the birds, I guess, and some other things, but
well,
it's
yeah. I mean,
make makes things tough.
there were lots of flies which I think are called St. Mark's flies. They're quite big black things, and I know that meadow pipit. I photographed meadow pipit a few times when I was there. They were quite easy, and they were collecting these things, and they were getting beakfuls of them. So I got a few shots with them.
Mm,
And that's the other good thing about spring, isn't it? Things are either having to collect a lot of food for themselves to replenish what body fat they've lost during migration, or they're starting to nest and they've got to feed young.
yeah.
So yeah, the chances of getting those sort of food collection type shots is quite good.
I ran into that situation accidentally the other day. I was cutting my grass, and I've got a little rider mower, and I was coming. Thank goodness I noticed it, and I was inches away from running these birds over. There were two baby northern mockingbirds in the front of the yard, so I stopped, turned everything off, and they wouldn't move. They hunker down because that's just what they do. So I put some gloves on. I don't know if there's any truth to this. Don't touch them. Your scent and the parents. I don't know. So I put gloves on, and I picked them up and I moved them into the mulch bed. So they were off of the grass, and I was watching the parents, fly around and feed them. It's always great to see the new generation of things in
Yeah.
rebirth. Rabbits are laying. I love we have cottontails, and they're cute as hell, but they dig these scrapes and lay these babies, and they kind of don't protect them. They're as far as parents go, I wouldn't put them high on the list. But I just had a scrape with a couple baby rabbits in it, or baby cottontails, the other day, and so it's nice to see that new generation of life and these things happening. It's exciting
Yeah, and it's food for some of the raptors.
for the rat snake. There's a big rat snake on my property. I call him Gus. He's like 6.5 feet. So I hope Gus is going to be checking out those cottontail babies, I suspect, quite soon.
That's amazing.
I
It's,
don't know
it's
why I call
spring.
him Gus, but he's just Gus.
Yeah, spring's so wonderful, isn't it? With all this stuff going on. I mean, it's like, what do you photograph next?
I know it's hard to determine what to shoot. Like I mix it up. It's in the Northeast. It's mostly birds, unfortunately. I wish I had more mammals here. I mean, I photograph muskrats a lot, beavers. What else do we have? That's raccoons, white-tailed deer, fox, and stuff like that. So
You got so much more than we have. I mean, UK
yeah,
is so denuded of stuff like that.
yeah,
You know, you're very lucky. You're
yeah,
very lucky. I mean, I know a lot of the bird colonies are second to none on the UK. I mean, obviously we've
yeah.
talked about
That's true.
Shetland, for example, and there are other really good. I mean, Anglesey, as I said, where I've just been, is particularly good. I think the thing about Anglesey is if you want to photograph seabirds, there are better locations to get close up shots, I would say, than Anglesey, unless you go on a boat trip or you pay to go on the Lighthouse Island and things like this. But it's quite good for wider in the frame type stuff. So you can get them on ledges. The cliffs themselves are quite photogenic, the rock formations. So you can do that sort of thing. And I think I sent you a picture as well, didn't I, when I did slow
Yeah.
shutter with guillemots and razorbills. So that you can play around with that sort of thing. And the other thing that it's really good for, I know it's not a migratory species, but is chough. There's
Mm,
nowhere better, I don't think, in the UK to photograph chough than South Stack on Anglesey,
mm.
because again, it's you walk down from the lighthouse along the cliffs, and they've got lots of little rocky outcrops, which at this time of the year are covered in thrift. The sort of pink, the sea pink
Oh,
flower.
that's really pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, the stuff that you were seeing on Shetland where
I
the
was just going
puffins
to say
are.
that would be the same as
Yeah,
what. Yeah, no,
yeah.
with the puffins mixed in, that's gorgeous. Yeah,
So I was getting them in flight, across the sea, so against the sea, and then just coming into the rocky outcrop. So you could just get this sort of strip of sea pink, out of focus sea pink in
beautiful.
the back. And if you compose it right, if you get lucky, yeah. I think did I
When
send
they're
you that
when they're
shot?
perched on the rocks too, Rob, it mixes in well with the lichen. On
Yeah,
some of the, you get some oranges and whites and everything else. It's stunning. It really
yeah.
is.
So if you want to do sort of wider in the frame stuff, which I don't think enough people do actually, and which we've
I
talked
agree.
about before on another podcast. But yeah,
Wide frames are hard in the United States. Easier for you all, I think, because you have a lot more height over there on the cliffs and the seabird
yeah,
colonies.
yeah,
Everything where I'm at is flat, and it's hard to do wider scenes. In order to do a wider scene that's, I think, aesthetically pleasing from a compositional standpoint, I think it's important where you do it in a more confined setting, where it's in a wood, where you
yeah.
have some trees or some things. But if you want that grand scene, like what you can do on cliffs or things like that, it's hard over here. You really don't have it because you have a flat. It's just there's
Yeah, I hadn't
there's
thought
no
of it like
dimension.
that actually, because there's only sort of so much negative space,
Yeah,
you can have in a picture, and the bird so small until it gets a
it's
bit
a
ridiculous.
pepper flake. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's
I
like,
don't like
oh,
I
this
don't
is
like
this is this is a small in the frame. Yeah, you just couldn't get close to it.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of people get into small in the frame when it comes to just minimalism. I don't think that's interesting. I think having a lot in the frame makes for a stronger composition where
Yeah,
you're
I
actually shooting a
agree.
landscape issue or a landscape image with the animal in it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like negative space. Don't get me wrong, but I think for negative space to work well, you've got to have enough detail and interest in the bird itself.
Mhm.
So it can't be too far away.
Yeah,
And that negative space, it's all about balance and concentration, isn't it? I mean, if you've got a mainly take the image that I was talking to you about when we started about the tern photographed into the sun. That's not frame filling, but I did that on purpose. Well, one, because it's easier to get the whole bird in the frame if you're not really tight on it when it's flying,
yeah,
and rely on cropping. You've got enough pixels to do it, so rely on cropping for your actual end composition. But it's sufficiently big in the frame so you can see the outline of the bird. You can see what it is. You can see those colors coming through the plumage, that sort of light refraction, which makes it interesting.
yeah.
But there is a lot of white space. But I think the balance is right. You can't have it too. I mean, if it was ridiculously small in the frame, what's the point? Because
Exactly.
that negative space is there to draw your attention to the subject.
Yeah,
Whereas if you're shooting wider in the frame and you've got more interest, you've got more environment, then you are drawing the concentration to the subject, but the eye is then wandering around everything else in the frame, which has an interest and hopefully a flow to it that works.
yeah. And it
'Cause,
helps tell the story of the animal
yeah,
potentially in that situation where you're saying this is the habitat, this is where the animal lives, and it helps tell, but it's also of interest too. And it forms different types of diagonals, textures, colors, and it just adds more complexity to the composition. What you were just talking about in the example of the turn image, what I think is really cool around that is the negative space is there to not take away but augment, because it
yeah,
provides a palette for the rainbow colors, the diffraction. So you're using it to an advantage. Whereas some of these things where we'll see images where it's all negative space and it's just, it's not leading you to a subject that's dominant in the frame, then in some cases it can
yeah.
take
You don't
away.
want negative space for negative
Y-
space's sake,
Yes. Yeah.
basically. Yeah, no, absolutely. Everything has to be for a reason. It's almost like turning something black and white. The exclusion of color. So the subtraction of something from an image adds to it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't work for everything. It only works in certain situations.
Yeah.
But sometimes those situations can surprise you. I remember shot a sequence of mute swans when Georgina was here in October, and we were out shooting together. And we had this situation where one adult was chasing another one around, which happens quite a lot, but they're quite aggressive actually. And so they make a lot of, they splash a lot of water around. It's quite dramatic, and if you get it in the right light, it can be quite interesting. So I took this sequence. I couldn't for the life of me work out why it really wasn't working very well. I thought it should do, and then I took the color away, and that changed the whole thing. And I thought
Mm,
that is what the problem was. The color, although there wasn't a lot. I was shooting it sort of low key, if you like, with a white plumage, and then I had them in shade in a bit of light, so I could, play around with that contrast thing and do some underexposure and make the background much darker than it actually was to the naked eye. But there was still a bit of color in there that was just distracting. And when I took it away, all of a sudden the image then made sense.
hmm
But then I looked at the composition and I thought, why does this still not work perfectly? And then it struck me that I'd gone for, whereas I wanted the birds and the reflection in the water, because I thought, well, that's quite nice to get the balance of the two. It naturally led me to compose the central line in the center of the photograph,
mm,
which normally you would use if you want to convey tranquility and
yeah.
harmony and that sort of thing. But of course, these two birds were going at it. So there was this, there was this sort of clash between, oh, that's a kind of a tranquil type composition, but there's some action going on here, and I think that's why it worked, but it didn't work as well as it could.
Mm.
So it's those sorts of things, and when you get down to sort of composition, and when we're talking about diagonals and stuff like that, I think that's a really interesting discussion we should have,
Oh,
actually.
I agree. And we both judge photo contests, obviously, and you've been doing it for many years now. And one of the things that I look at from a composition standpoint is lines and
Yeah.
curves. I mean, it immediately will stand out to me. And sometimes, like, I'll be I've been doing this actually over the past couple of days, just going through thousands of images that I've been taking over the past couple of weeks. And I use photo mechanics, so it just do, and there's so many images because I'm taking 30 frames a second. So it's just, especially if there's a good sequence, right? I mean, it's like every little thing. So I'm basically shooting video, but I'm going through these frames, and intrinsically I'll stop. I don't even know why. My body will just stop, and I'm like, that's the one. And I'm like, huh, interesting. I wonder why this is the one that stuck out to me. I look at it closely, and it's because there's some sort of curve or there's some sort of diagonal. There's just something that comes together, and it's almost like subliminal. I feel like it's, our brains gravitate to some of these things in terms of trying to find, the order out of chaos. But for me, it just comes naturally now. I see.
But I think there are natural things, aren't there? It's like the golden spiral,
Yeah,
and that sort of link to the Fibonacci sequence and all that sort of thing, as to why we find things aesthetically pleasing.
yeah,
It is a bit subliminal,
yeah.
because
Symmetrics, that's
yeah, I
another
mean,
one.
I do the same when I'm composing an image. If I've got time to compose an image rather than just chasing some action around somewhere and, as spraying and praying, if you like, and hoping I get something decent that I can compose by cropping it or whatever needs to happen.
hmm
When you sit there and you've got a relatively static subject, or you're shooting a landscape or whatever it might be, and you can take your time over it, I find these things come naturally to me. Nobody ever taught me the rule of thirds. I did that naturally in terms of the compositions that I came up with. And I think some people just do that and they have an eye for it, and
Yeah,
others don't. It's like the golden spiral. It's like, well, those relationships for me come naturally when I look at things.
yeah. And a lot of times it's a feeling, and it's, I've seen some people who, I don't know, maybe they just don't have that sense, or they try too hard. Like, I've come across photographers in the field where they pull out this grid and they're holding the grid out to the lens, and they're marking things down to get I'm like, you're trying way too hard, pal.
You lose that.
It becomes technical,
Yeah,
and it becomes less of an art.
exactly.
Yeah.
I know you need to start from a technical perspective with lots of things, but then you're losing that feeling. Well, I was writing an article the other day, and I think when you talk about photography and you talk about creative photography, there are people out there that create.
Yeah.
There are creators, and
With
then there
any
are
type of tool,
yeah,
honestly.
and then there are mimics. It's
Yeah.
rather like you either write a song or you cover it, but the cover version of a song is never as good as the original, because the person covering the song doesn't have the feelings that the original artist had when they composed it. They don't have the same reasons for
Mm.
composing the song, so they can't put the same amount of feeling into it. And I think that works with photography as well. If
Yeah.
you make it too technical and you try and follow too much of a rigid system, if you like, then you lose that individuality and the personality in a picture. And I think that's what shines through with winning images in competitions, for example,
Yeah.
is that extra little something, that personality that goes into a picture.
To your previous musical analogy, I will say "Because the Night" by 10,000 Maniacs might have been slightly better than the Bruce Springsteen version, but who wrote the song? Other than that, I can't think of. But no, yeah, I'm just kind of kidding. You're absolutely right. And I will say, and again, this is going to be a controversial statement. Some people may agree with me, some people may not. That I've come across so many photographers over the years in the field and online and speaking to people. Whenever I come across a photographer and they're excellent technically. They're like, oh, the Canon's coming out with the R1. It's going to have this many megapixels. Is going to do this and this and this and this and this, and they're really good at the gear and the tech. That does not necessarily mean they're artistic and they can shoot incredible images. The most artistic images I've seen and the most artistic photographers that I come across are not technical by any means. They know how to operate shutter, aperture, ISO, and do whatever needs to be done from a general sense. But then they're masters of composition, of light, of storytelling, and they don't care about a lot of these different things. They don't care about, an anti-haze shield or any of this other stuff. They just don't, and they make incredible images. There are more photographers caught up in the tech of it than there are, frankly, learning composition, getting better, and really trying to work on coming up with art in the field.
Yeah. I mean, do you think I could beat Rory McIlroy on the golf course if I had a $3,000 set of golf clubs
That's
and he had something from Walmart?
Yeah.
Who do you think's going to win?
That's right. That's right.
And it's the same. I
But the
talked to
sad thing is, though, Rob, and you're exactly right. I do feel, though, there's a lot of people that they think I can get the better gear and I'm going to buy the better gear and I'm going to have the best gear and I'm going to do all the research and go and watch all these YouTube videos of tech reviews and all this stuff. And I think it's implied that that's going to make you a better photographer, whereas it's not. It just isn't.
No.
Granted, having gear helps when it comes to low light situations, when it comes to taking a dynamic sequence where you need 30 frames a second or you're shooting it, again, low light, whatnot. Yeah, totally. But when it comes to creating art in the field, you really don't need all of that. You don't need much. And people don't strive to better themselves in that area. They strive in these other situations.
Because they think it's a shortcut.
I think that's right.
Taking better images. Yeah. No, I agree, because I think equipment's a real leveler anyway now.
Yeah.
I mean, what is the difference in most circumstances between 6 frames a second and 20 frames a second?
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, there are times when you're shooting a sequence of action when you're going to want the faster frame rate. I get it. But most of the time, it's rubbish. It's not going to change the situation. I had this conversation with Ray Hennessy on the podcast that I did with him a few weeks ago. And he was talking about frame rate and how he often sets the Z9, which obviously do 20 frames a second in RAW, to 6 frames a second, because he doesn't really need it a lot of the time. And all he was doing was having to go through thousands more images because he was taking a load more that were unnecessary.
Which makes sense because he shoots a lot. I mean, he's out
Yeah.
there shooting. Yeah.
And actually, the point I made to him is I hadn't really thought of it that way, but it gives you a little bit more time to be more composed about something.
Yeah. Be more
Rather
mindful,
than,
more
so
intentional
I've
about
just I've
when you're
just
shooting.
heard a tawny owl screeching out of the window. Sorry, just, just got a bit sidetracked.
Rob will be back in 5 minutes, folks.
Yeah, exactly. They often do it. Honestly, leave the windows open there, particularly this time of the year. They're out there screeching, and I've had barn owl quite close as well recently, which has been good.
That's a great
You know,
bird. I
in
wish
the village.
they're so few and far between over here. They actually breed on an island that I can probably throw a rock to. I could see from my house, and they've never come over here. Unfortunately,
No,
always
I'm quite spoilt actually because I've got Salisbury Plain just down the road, and they're quite.
Mm.
I wouldn't say they're relatively easy to see. Not easy to photograph, but they're relatively easy to see.
That's a blessing. That's one good thing about the UK's got the barn owl thing locked up
Yeah.
over the United States. That's for sure.
Yeah, if you know where to go, you've got to know where to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a good time of year for barn owl. Actually, I have to say.
Yeah.
They'll be feeding young, and yeah, so that's quite cool. You get them hunting early in the morning obviously when it gets light. And we ought to talk about light actually.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the issues I had on Anglesey, and I was chatting before we started recording, was that at this time of the year, depending on where you live, obviously, but most people in our parts of the sort of northern hemisphere, it gets light very early in the morning, and obviously the further north you are, the earlier it will be. And I know that, well, when I went to the reason I went to Anglesey is that Jennifer was working for the week on the island. So I had to drop her off in the mornings, which meant I couldn't get really early starts. So I wasn't getting to these places until about 8 o'clock in the morning, which really the light's starting to get a bit harsh by then because the sunrise is 5-ish, 5:30 this time of the year. So I only really had an hour of light that was okay because it was bright sun. So after that, I was trying to work with very bright light and having to come up with other ways of photographing things to get the best out of it. What's your sort of, have you got any sort of tips and tricks for people working with the harsher light at this time of the year?
That's a good question. I mean, this time of year, actually, I'm actually chasing days where there's very little light, gray skies, cloudy. Actually, I like rain. I've been shooting in drizzly, rainy conditions because it adds pastels to the forest.
Yeah, no, it's really
underneath
nice.
the forest canopy. But in the situation you just described, I think it can be tough. It can be challenging. So I think you have to be very deliberate, and I think you need to come away from a shoot thinking, okay, I want to get a certain type of image, maybe one or two images that you're unique and stand out. And I'm not going to come away with hundreds and hundreds of images, right? Just based on the conditions. So it sounds like if you're later in the morning and the light is getting harsh, go for those extreme contrast scenes. I think that stands out. And if there's shadows, utilize the shadows. A lot of people, I think they get afraid of shadows when they start seeing things. Use them to your advantage. People typically shy away when they see that type of stuff. But I think if you're in an environment where the light is harsh, take total advantage of the shadow. I mean, again,
I tell you what would be a good thing
old
for
word,
people.
light defines, shadows. Wait, what's the old saying? Light illuminates or shadows define, I think, or something like that. But anyhow, take advantage of the shadows and go for that.
I tell you, a good thing to look at in terms of those sort of high contrast things is the way street photographers use
the best.
The contrast between shadow and highlight to compose their images, and portrait photography as well to a degree. And I think there's a lot we can learn from those
street photographer, Rob. He's one of the best photographers out there. And he sometimes will do wildlife. What's his name? He's famous, actually. I'm going to plug him if I can. He's on Instagram. Schaller, his last name is. Does that ring a bell?
No.
Alan Schaller, I think it is. And when he does animals, I mean, Alan, if I'm saying this correctly, Alan Schaller, Schaller. He's a black and white photographer, and he does everything, but he does urban and street scenes. Yeah. And he when it comes to the situation we were just talking about with harsher light and shadows and contrast, one of the best out there. Rarely do I see anybody as good as this guy.
Yeah,
Competition.
another guy is a guy called Sean Tucker, I think, which most people know Sean. He's a really good street photographer. He uses that sort of contrasting light really well in his work. He's got an excellent YouTube channel as well. A lot of mindfulness stuff. He does. He sits on his couch at home and eulogizes about various things. But it's a really good channel. I quite like watching his stuff. But he's a really good street photographer. Does some landscapes as well. Portrait photographer too. So
This is like a
yeah.
like
Josh is just. You can't see this on the podcast, but Josh is just holding up his phone to the screen, showing me his Instagram account.
This is what you do in that light, in that type of light. Go to Alan Schaller on Instagram and just check out some of his stuff. It's up. The other thing that comes to my mind, Rob, just going back to what we were previously talking about with composition and being mindful and whatnot. One of the things I find during spring migration, a lot of photographers over here, they get caught up in all the different types of species that they're coming across, different subjects, right? Because through the dead of winter, a lot of people are photographing crows, ravens, bird feeder birds like titmice and chickadees and stuff over here, and they just don't have a lot. They don't see a lot. And then all of a sudden you're getting, you can be out here and get over 100 species in one day. So people get overwhelmed by that. And it becomes more of a documentarian type thing. Oh, I got pictures of people will say, I got pictures of 10 warblers yesterday and I got this and here are all my pictures. And I'm like, well, and they'll ask me for feedback and I'm very upfront with them. I'm like, okay, it's the same shot. One bird is yellow, one bird is blue, but it's a bird on a stick and it's singing and it's the same composition. It's the same thing. So one thing I try to tell people, for folks who are listening too, don't get caught up in taking, unless that's your thing and you want to go and count birds and you want to just document everything that's moving through, that's fine. That can be a whole separate project. But if it comes down to artistic composition and coming up with a really pleasing image, don't be overwhelmed by all this stuff. Just focus on certain things that you come across that offer that opportunity and that experience to come up with a really strong image and stay with the subject and make that work. Don't get distracted because there's all these other things around you. Very easy to get distracted in this environment because you can have 10 different birds singing and calling around. It's like, oh, which one do I want to shoot? And people freeze.
It's like, if you're a lion hunting a wildebeest and you've got a pack of 3 dozen, you can't chase them all. You got to pick one.
Peregrine with starlings and like a murmuration.
Pick one, and focus on it. And it's exactly the same thing. Otherwise, you just end up running around and catching nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is the same in photography. And I quite like to concentrate on one or two things at a time. I mean, obviously, there are situations where you're going to get something that you can't turn down.
Yeah,
and we all do that.
And stick with it. That's the universe saying, this is your opportunity. Stick with it.
Stick with it and concentrate on it. There were at Kemlin Bay, actually, the second time I went, I walked up to the terns and started photographing them in flight. And within 5 minutes, I thought to myself, I'm just taking exactly the same pictures that I took the other day. Let me walk away from here and let me go and find something else because I'm wasting my time.
Yeah.
I could go and photograph. It doesn't matter what it is. And in fact, I found a stone chat that was very obliging, obviously on territory, was hopping around various perches, and the light was getting pretty harsh. So I did a number of different compositions with it because it quite helpfully went and sat on different plants. So I had, twiggy stuff and flowery stuff, and I could walk around it. So I could change the angle of the light. I could change the background. So I could have an out of focus vegetation background that was sort of mainly green. I could go for the blue of the sea. I could go and overexpose the sky looking into the sun and have a high key, almost like, pencil type sketch image. This is all of the same bird within, I don't know, 20 meters.
Yeah. And that's the situation radius. You want to spend time on. You want to take advantage of that situation.
Exactly. And I got it in various, it was bird on a stick. Okay, it was bird on a stick, but it was bird on a stick high key.
Hmm.
It was bird on a stick with different backgrounds. It was bird on a different stick. It was bird singing on a stick. It was, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was the male, so it's, it's more colourful. And it just goes to show. I had it in my mind. I almost had an article in my mind while I was doing it, because this is the way I work. About how you can photograph the same subject but come up with different feels for the same shot effectively, because it's bird on a stick. I couldn't really do too much else with it because it was just sat there singing, or shouting at me, probably, which is what it was doing. But anyway, but it just goes to show what you can do if you just move around a subject a little bit, treat it in a different way, let the light fall on it in a different angle, get a different background in there. You can come away with quite a few pictures of the same subject but in a different style, and I that was quite pleasing to me. It was much better way of spending my time than taking the same pictures of the terns that I'd taken the other day, because that's
Yeah.
all I would have done there, because they were just doing the same thing.
And
And
to your point too, like it's the other side of what I was just saying too. Once you have good images and you've spent time with that subject, you have to know when to walk away too, right? I mean, so it's a matter of figuring out, okay, I'm done with this opportunity. I'm going to move on, or I'm going to focus on something different. I'm going to go to a different area. I'm going to look for different birds or animals, and I'm going to mix it up. I don't know what your thought is on this, Rob. I'll ask you this question too. What your take is. Like for me, if I'm out shooting all day, it's in the spring, and especially on the weekends, I'm out morning, sometimes till sunset. I'm happy if I come away with one strong image. That's my goal typically. If I'm shooting, I'd like to come away with one image that I'm proud of, that I can go back and work and in Photoshop process it and put it up on my website. Each year, when it comes to really solid quality images, and I know this because when I call for contests, I look at all the different contests and I'll put images together. I try to choose my best work for the year and then I submit it. I'm happy if I get 20 really solid images a year. Now I'm probably in the minority. People like to, I think it's quality over quantity, no doubt. But for me, it's more about capturing one or two really strong images, hopefully one from an all-day shoot, and then each year, trying to come up with some, above average, really solid images. And if I get 20, maybe more than that, I'm happy. That's what my metric is.
I think you make a really good point, because this is something I did write about as well, not recently. Because I've worked with so many good photographers over the years. This is something that does crop up. Is how many images do you expect to come away with from a typical year's shooting that you're really happy with? And the answer from most of them is certainly less than a dozen.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them it's 4 or 5. If they come away with 4 or 5 images that they're really pleased with from a whole year's worth of shooting, bearing in mind that a lot of these people are doing it full time, so they're out in the field a lot, that says something. So
Yeah.
I think, to your point, when you're saying, I want to come away with at least one reasonable shot in a day, I think that's a realistic goal, and to have your expectations raised beyond that point. Okay, you might get a situation, and we've all been there, where you've got a combination of amazing conditions. You're at the place at the right time of the day, the right things are in front of you, doing the right stuff, and you end up with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 really strong images. But those situations are extremely rare. Most
Yeah.
of the time you're having to work really hard.
Yeah.
And actually, I think those are the pictures that are better anyway, because you feel like you've worked for it more, you feel like you've earned it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a bit of a challenge. I like that. So yeah, I'm with you. I think
Yeah.
once I mean, I got to the point I filled the cards with these bloody flying turns. And I just had to go through and delete most of them, because they were just ordinary flying turns on a blue sky. that to me, it's nice from a documentary point of view. And yes, the wing positions are slightly different, the body position slightly different. Some have got sand eels, some haven't, some have got other carrying interesting stuff, but most of it is the same, pretty
Hmm.
much. And there's nothing
And
inspiring.
by you deleting those images, you're not deleting the experience. It was still a great experience. You spent time with them. I think some people, getting into photography and wildlife photography per se, they initially gravitate toward that collection. I got to
Yeah,
collect. I'm collecting all these images, and I got all these shots, and I processed 30 images from the thing, and that's great, and it's fine. You can do that, but even if you only take, if you're very discerning and you decide to keep one or two images and process them, and you say, okay, these are some of my better images from the shoot, or one or two, by deleting some of the images and culling through, that doesn't mean you're not appreciative of the experience, or you're deleting the experience. It's all about the experience and being there. It's just being more subjective, and the longer you shoot, the more refined your tastes become. It's just as simple as that. If I went to that turn shoot many, many years ago, I would probably try to process 15, 20 images of all the different wing positions. But now I would probably just go to one or two shots and look at them, and then pick the one that I really like, and then
yeah.
process it and upload it. It's just, it's a natural thing over time. I think most people they're on that arc, and they just continue to become
I
more
mean,
and more discerning.
if you're like me, you can't help but take pictures when you're in that situation because you've
Yeah.
got all these.
Feels good.
Yeah, it feels good. You've got all these birds flying around you, but in the cold light of day, when you sit there and you go through those images and you're honest with yourself, there are very, very few that are going to pass that quality control, if you like, and
Yeah.
make it to the processing stage. And what is the point of keeping the majority of the other shots? There really isn't any point, because you, as you say, you've got the memory. And I have been there before many years ago, and I couldn't remember where it was, but I remember going there, and I remember a similar experience, but with equipment that wasn't so advanced. So, it was nice to revisit it with, the modern cameras and lenses, and having a bit more reach with the focal length and all this sort of stuff, and being more experienced from a photography standpoint and an artistic standpoint, trying to photograph them in different ways. But yeah, I think once you've exhausted something, I could have done slow shutter with them, but not in the conditions that I had,
Yeah.
because it would have been it would have been against a blue sky. And I think the slow shutter stuff that works well, you have textures and patterns in the background, which you can't get with blue skies, or something which is like, or a lot of the time with an out of focus sea, or that sort of, you need a bit of contrasted texture in the, I think, to really make it interesting.
Yeah.
And those bright conditions, I just wasn't getting it. I couldn't get the shutter speed anyway, even if I tried, because it was just too bright.
Mm.
So I couldn't slow it down enough. So that really wasn't even on my radar.
You probably needed an ND filter,
The
right? Or
ND
something
filter,
like
yeah. But then that messes with the autofocus
that. Yeah. Yeah.
to a degree, depending on how dark you have to go. So yeah, you know, yeah, once you've exhausted something, I think you walk away and go and find something else and try and do, because I just knew I couldn't do anything else with them.
Yeah.
Even, I like to think about that. I like to be able to photograph things in different ways, but I just couldn't think of another way of doing it.
Yeah. And try not to, I would say for folks too, try not to shoot different species or subjects the same way. So try different approaches with different animals. Like a good example, we were just talking about songbirds, bird on a stick, 600 millimeter, bird on a stick, singing, and what's changed? The color of the bird, and yeah, that's it. So
Yeah.
compositionally, you're not doing anything different. Try to think about what you want to do differently when you approach different subjects, because at this, having a different songbird in an image, or having a different shorebird on a beach in an image, doesn't make the image different. At the end of the day, it really doesn't, because these birds were in some ways just very similar looking. And if you're shooting them in the same sequence, if you're shooting shorebirds, for instance, if you're laying down and you're shooting shorebirds, they walk up to you and you get that shot where they're just there walking on the beach, eye level, and you're laying in the sand. Okay, great. But what can you do? Think about what you can do beyond that. Maybe
Yeah,
standing up.
what elevates that image over every other image that's out
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Because you're just replicating what's gone before. It might be the first time you've done it. It might be the first time you photographed that bird. Fine. I have no
Enjoy
problem.
it. Yeah.
Photography is there to be enjoyed. Go and do that, fill your boots. And I'd do the same. I would take that standard shot as well. But once you've done that, then try and think about how else can I do it? Can I do it in a different way? Can
Yeah.
I use slow shutter? Can I use wide in the frame? I don't know. Can I turn it upside down, inside out?
Yeah.
Photograph it standing on my head. That, I'm being a bit facetious, but it's trying to think of a different approach with things, because if you want your photography to be different, you need to do something
Yeah.
different. What's
And
that?
it's easy for us to say this too, because we judge photo contests. So you and I have seen hundreds of thousands of images over the years. And so, we have keen eyes to see, okay, yeah, this has been done. This has been done. A lot of people will have to discover that on their own as they go through their photography journey. I remember when shooting early on, I would shoot something, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so proud of this. And it's great. But at the same time, that doesn't make it a unique image either, right? So over time, people, I think, get a better. We have, I think, a little bit of a leg up because we've seen all these images over the years from photographers all over the world, and then we can see what's been done and what hasn't.
And they're
been done.
knocking out some amazing stuff. And sometimes they'll come up with a new idea, and you go, "Oh,
Yeah.
Why
How did they
haven't I
think
thought of
this
that?"
one up? Yeah, I know.
I mean, for instance, the first time you saw something, a duck in city lights in the Boca, and those sorts of things, those elongated lights, reflections of city lights. You go, "Oh, that's amazing." And then you see more and more and more of them, and you go, "Still good, but yeah, I'm done with that now."
So much has been done, and I think we're at such a point of saturation with wildlife photography. The things that come off, at least for me, and I'd like to hear your input on this, Rob. What comes off to me is novel, because it's so saturated now, or the complete abstract takes on things like in camera multiple exposure. Using I've seen certain photographers now, they're using utensils and waving them around the like complete over the top graphic artist type stuff, very abstract, throwing the lens upside down and circle eights and doing all types of things, and using all different types of light, artificial lights and things like that. It's done more, I think, on a macro level to a certain extent, but that is the only thing I see that's pushing the envelope, because so many of the other things have just been done. They really have.
I mean,
I'm not seeing a lot of innovation.
That's the problem with digital equipment, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
because it's so accessible to everybody these days. I mean, if you took yourself back 40 years with people working with film, think about the technology they had and how far that's come and how much more accessible that is to everybody now. It's like you only had a handful of people doing it back then, and they were so constrained by, even you think about the ISO of film. I mean, it's nowhere near. I mean, they were talking about 400 ISO film, 800 at a push.
I'm so glad you're saying this, because I was with a friend of mine, Jim from Pennsylvania, and we were shooting songbirds together, and he was telling me there's this famous photographer in America. He was friends with Ansel Adams. His name was Elliot Porter. And he was basically one of the first, or if not the first, to photograph birds in color. And he was using, the old box cameras.
Yeah.
And he has these images, and they're actually quite incredible, of all these warblers, and songbirds. But the way he did it, he would not pass our ethics test, Rob. He would set up right on the nest. He'd find the nests. And
that's
then
the way they all did it.
Yeah. And in these images, I'm looking at them, they're from the 40s. And it's amazing to see what he was able to do. Now, today, obviously, and even then, when you read the book and what he's doing ethically, it doesn't cut muster. There were more birds back then.
But you have to think that
he's trying to document it and show people.
But that was a different time. I mean, that was a time when nobody else was doing it. So the actual ethically now, in terms of today's environment, you'd look at it differently. But back then, because
Yeah.
there were so few people doing it, in fact, that virtually nobody was doing it, the impact was so minimal. And just think of the impact that those images then had, and the good that they were doing from a
Yeah.
conservation point of view. When you look at the balance of those things, I don't
Yeah.
see an issue with it. Fast
No one
forward,
even knew. No one even knew these birds existed. Part of it was to say, "Hey, this is in your backyard."
yeah.
I mean,
This is the point I'm making. I mean, you
yeah.
fast forward, however many years, obviously to today, and you can't do that in the same way, because that encourages everybody else to do it, and the
Yeah.
impact is going to be massive, particularly bearing in mind the pressure that is already on those populations. And we understand so much more about those species, and there's so much more material available photographically. You don't need to photograph
That's right.
those species anymore.
Yeah.
At that time, there probably were no images of those
None.
birds.
None.
So
He
yeah, the cost versus benefit of that, is
he would find the nest of, like, I think it was tanagers, kinglets, and like these treetop nesters, Rob. And he would have somebody go up there and cut the branch and put it on a harness, and then they would lower the branch a foot at a time until it came all the way down the eye level, and
wow.
then the birds would slowly adjust until they wouldn't care anymore, and they'd come and bring food to the young, and then he would just photo. I mean, some of the things this guy did to get these images, it's
Well,
completely
I've heard of there was photographers that I met, actually, they're dead now, but when I first started sorting out this photo library 15 years ago, maybe, and this is all color transparencies, from, I mean, medium format and 35 mm from the 1970s. And this is what these guys were doing. They were building scaffold towers,
yeah.
get to, that, so they could be eye level with these nests, and this is how they were doing it. But their impact was so minimal, and they were the first people to really photograph a lot of those species. I mean, images which are still used today
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
books. It's incredible. I mean,
And
their work
we were
is
just talking
amazing.
about composition and art and having an artistic eye versus technology. And a lot of these bird pictures in here, these are songbirds. They're better than most of what I see out there now. I mean, notwithstanding, you take even the nests away. He has stuff like outside of that in
Yeah.
here, and they're just better because he was a master photographer. I mean, he was friends with Ansel Adams. I mean, these guys go way back. So it's you can't put a value on that.
And these guys did not have 20 frames a second.
No, it was one shot with
And a memory card
flash.
that you could put 5,000 images on.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
It's just, I mean, one shot, and it's actually incredible when I'm looking at some of this stuff and some of the thought and whatnot that went into these things.
do you know? I
Yeah.
tell you what would be an interesting exercise, actually, and I've often thought about this. Is to, if you challenged yourself to go out and have a limit on the amount of photographs you could take, and you could only take one at a time. So
Mm,
say you went out and you just mirrored, I don't know, 24 or 36 exposure, 35 mm film roll, for example, and say, right, that's the number of exposures I've got for the day, and
yeah.
I can only shoot one frame at a time. I can't put it on multi-frame rate or anything like that. I wonder what you would be able to come away with. I bet you'd be so much more considered about what you,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
selective about what you photographed.
I've thought about this actually, and the reason why I have, there's a famous photographer, wildlife photographer, American actually. His name was Jim Brandenburg. He passed away literally like a month or two ago. He did a project. He was a wildlife photographer of the year winner some years ago. He had a wolf image. He was from upstate Minnesota, and he just went out. He had a film camera. This was, I think, the 80s or maybe the 70s. I can't remember, but it was many years ago. And he went out and only took one image each day for the year. And he compiled all of these images and made a book about it. And he would, have a little story for each day and each image. And he came away with some stunning images. One of the images he has in there is a loon flapping its wings in the water near like a little island in a lake in northern Minnesota with spruce trees coming out. It's stunning. But he challenged himself just to do that once a day. And that was his project. And he made a book. I have the book actually. And I've always thought about that. I think that would be
Yeah, be
super,
awesome, wouldn't
super
it? We ought to
great.
do it,
It would
actually.
be.
We
It
ought to
would.
do it. We ought to make a film about it or something,
Yeah,
and just yeah,
I
that
think it
that
would
would
be
be
great.
awesome. Yeah.
Although I'd probably like, oh, I'm taking my one image today, and I put the film camera away, and then I bring the R3 out, and then for the
Well,
next.
actually, no, I'm not talking about film camera. I'm actually thinking about doing it digitally, but
Okay,
you
yeah,
limit yourself to that one shot, and then yeah,
maybe,
uh,
yeah, maybe one day a month where I take one image.
yeah, be interesting, wouldn't it?
It would
Anyway, I
be.
just often thought about that as a challenge, because
Yeah.
it, you forget.
Am I getting that right? Was it one image a day, or was it one image? I think it was one. Yeah, one image a day for a year.
Yeah, because there
We
was
had some
'cause there
extraordinary
was
images.
I can't remember her name. There was another photographer, American photographer, who photographed something close to their home or something on a white background every day.
Oh,
Just something out of nature. So it might be a leaf, it might be a flower petal, it might be a beetle, or whatever it might be. It might be a pattern of something. But yeah, just took it away and photographed it against a white background, and then made a book of it. I can't remember her name.
I'm looking at Jim's book. It was actually not the whole year. It was he did it for 90 days. So he did it for 3 months essentially, and he did one image per day. It was between autumn and the autumn equinox and winter solstice. Actually, was what he did.
Wow.
Yeah,
So that
and
was it was an interesting time of year as well.
yeah, Chased by the Light, I think is the name of the 90-day journey. It's
Yeah, and
called.
it was mainly wildlife, was it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it. It's amazing. Yeah, it's nature too. I remember there was some stuff of sheets of ice on some of the lakes and stuff
Yeah.
like that, some patterns and leaves and then other things mixed in like loons and whatnot. I think he had a wolf in there too, which it was half of a wolf's face. There was a tree in front of it. Right now, it wouldn't get a lot of attention. Back then, it did. It was just different back then, and I think that
Different times.
was a huge winner in wildlife photography.
Yeah. But it comes back to the point we were making about the amount of material that's out there.
Yeah.
And trying to do something that's different and stands out is increasingly more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it stands to reason, doesn't it? The more available this equipment is to people, the more people doing it, the more ideas are being explored, the less there is to discover in a way. But I think there's always a different way you can do things.
And shooting different types of photography, shooting different ways, I should say, branches you out and makes you more versatile, and it makes you a better wildlife photographer. One thing I've noticed, like when it comes to actually this Elliot Porter guy, I was looking at he did landscapes a lot too. And it could have been the technology at the time, but one thing I've noticed with wildlife photographers when they branch out in the landscapes, because that's typically the second piece. If you shoot wildlife and you shoot anything else, it's more than likely not street art or graffiti or anything like that.
Yeah, it's
It's
like me.
normally
I mean, I went the
natural
other way from
yeah,
landscape to
landscapes. Yeah.
to
And
wild.
I've noticed holistically, if you look at wildlife photographers that shoot landscapes, the landscape images don't have a lot of depth to them. They're more 2D. They're not 3D. You know what I mean? Like layered woodland shots. Not I shouldn't say layered, but just like shots of woodland or certain things. They're beautiful and they're composed nicely, but there's not a lot of depth. And I think it's because wildlife photographers shoot mostly with longer focal lengths that flatten the scene, and it's just you develop
They
and
train their eyes.
yeah. So I think shooting differently, using different types of focal lengths, whether it's landscape, we were talking about even like midday street scenes, it makes you more versatile and it gets you thinking outside of the box and composing things differently.
Yeah. I mean, here's another thing for you as well. It's maybe ditching the long telephoto, for example,
Yeah.
and going with a 24 to 120 or something like that, and going, okay, that's the lens you've got. Go out and shoot
Yeah.
something with that.
And maybe that's
Rather
the
than
challenge. One shot a day for so many days, but only the same lens and the same camera body too, right?
one of the things we did with Georgina when she came to stay was because Stonehenge is literally just down the road from me. That was an obvious visit. So the first day she got here, that's what we did. We went to Stonehenge. Was I going to go and take my telephoto to Stonehenge? Well, no, of course I wasn't. We weren't there to photograph birds. So I took the Z9, but I took 24 to 120. with me. But of course, we ended up photographing birds because that's what you do, isn't it? Yeah, well, there are lots of crows hopping around and that sort of thing. But actually, because I didn't have the telephoto, meant I had to shoot a little wider, or I had to be a little bit more inventive with them. And I quite enjoyed some of the results from that because you were forced into that
Yeah.
situation,
You
thinking
made
slightly
do with what you
differently.
had. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to put yourself. Put yourself outside of your normal comfort zone, because my comfort zone is, the 180 to 600 and the Z9.
I'll say this, and probably controversial. I know a lot of photographers who were born and raised in learning wildlife photography on a 70 to 200 or a 100 to 400 zoom versus others that started with a 600. The group in the former category came out always better. They just did,
Yeah,
because everybody who people just immediately want to reach for the longest telephoto lens, and that's great, but it's so limiting. In my opinion, the wider and the looser you go out, the more opportunities you have to compose different images.
yeah,
Just my
absolutely.
experience and how people trained.
Well, we kind of went off on a bit of a tangent, really, haven't we? We started off talking about
I'm going to
spring
add this in at
photography,
the end.
and
Spring. It's spring, Rob. Okay,
yeah,
now we
yeah,
hit that
it's
theme,
it's it's spring. Yeah. Anyway, so that was an excellent discussion we had about spring photography, Josh.
we mixed it in there. We were
Yeah,
able to have
we
a
did,
spring theme.
we
Yeah.
did. Oh dear. Anyway, I've got lots of topics that I've been putting together, and thanks to a lot of the listeners as well who've been
Mhm.
emailing with some really good suggestions, which we'll certainly pick up on and try and run with, over the course of time. Can't say we'll get to them all or get to them quickly, but they're there. I've put them in a list, so do keep them coming, and thank you so much for all the nice messages that we've been receiving as well from people that have obviously enjoying the content. I'm so glad, because this is a lot of fun to do, right? This is
Yeah,
why we do it. We
I
love having
love
these
talking about this
conversations.
stuff. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's fun to talk about things and try to share content with you all that hopefully you can learn something or take away, right? I mean, that's when folks walk away from these podcasts, I hope there's one or two nuggets at least they can take away, and it helps them with their photography
and
versus
it,
just us talking about, oh, look at,
and
I
it, and
did
it
this
helps
shot,
us. I
right?
mean, it gives us some
Yeah.
ideas, because we don't know it all. I mean, photography is a journey. You never stop
Yeah.
learning. You never stop improving what you do. There are so many people out there doing way better work than I will ever do. I won't speak for Josh, obviously.
Oh no. I mean, look, we're
Um,
lifelong students, right? I mean, that's
yeah, exactly. So we don't, we don't pretend to know all the answers, because we don't. But it's fun to talk about it. So
yeah.
and hopefully we'll get a few more guests on as well. We've got a few ideas for those. So yeah, what's next? You're just continuing with the spring stuff, I guess, until
Yeah,
that
you got
dries up a
Memorial Day
little bit.
weekend, so there's a long weekend coming up. So
Yeah,
shorebirds,
same.
that's
Yeah,
going to be the big focus. And then into June, things settle down, and most of the residents, in and around the house here, osprey breeders, herons,
yeah,
green herons, great egrets, great blue herons. I'll spend time with them, just snow egrets and stuff. So kayaking and just shooting them as I find different scenes on the evenings, and it's great. And then I've got I doubled the size of my pollinator garden over the past year. And by the way, I blame Scott Keys for this. By the way, he runs this native plant kind of thing,
yeah.
and
I
so
know he
talking
does.
about all
Yeah,
these
yeah,
plants. But
yeah,
anyhow, I kind of went down this rabbit hole, and he and another guy, Mike Fahey, have helped me out a ton. Fairfax Mike on Instagram, great guy. I built this pollinator garden now, and I'm going to try to reap the rewards of it now. So I want to do a lot of macro photography with different types of butterflies, insects, and
yeah. Well, I think it's the time, isn't it, for
spiders.
macro work? Really, the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, it's great. It's a perfect time
when
in
the
the
birds
morning.
start slowing down a bit. Yeah,
I
because
try
they're
to
all.
do it in the morning when everything's kind of docile. I've noticed, and I don't have a lot of experience with butterflies and all different types of insects, but I do notice in the morning when things are a lot slower. And then if you try to do it midday, even if it's cloudy, good,
Oh, you
you're not
got
gonna,
no chance.
nothing's
No,
coming close.
yeah, that's the key. All those really lovely butterfly shots are done when they're still cold in the morning and they haven't
Yeah,
warmed up, so they're
yeah,
not so flighty. So yeah, that's the trick.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the trick with them. I mean, for me, I guess next is Ireland. I'm going to Ireland in about 3 or 4 weeks
That'll be
for a
great.
week to Galway. So I mean, other than Dublin, I've never been to Ireland before. So I'm looking forward to that. So Jen and I are catching the ferry from Holyhead, funnily enough, where I've just come back from, across to Ireland, well, across to Dublin, and then we're driving across Ireland to Galway, staying there for a week.
Oh,
So yeah, there'll be some opportunities there, I guess, depending on what the weather does. But whatever the weather does, it'll be interesting.
yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, and I guess really for me, when I get back, I'll probably be back into the macro work and the insects and things like that, which I'll pick up on. I mean, we've had such, I don't know about you, but we've had such a dry spring. It's
Yeah.
really been odd. I mean, it hasn't rained. I mean, it rained yesterday, but it hasn't rained for about 3 months before that.
Yeah.
After we've had one of the wettest winters on record.
Yeah. Same. I mean, same here. Last winter, well, not this past winter, the winter before in the spring, it was just flood tides after deluges of rain. I think we had 46 inches of rain last winter. And then it's been since fall, we've been in drought-like conditions. We had some rain recently, but it's been fairly dry. We had that El Nino season, which was last year, and now we're in, we're outside of that now. And now it's so unpredictable. It's
Well,
crazy.
I mean, normally at this time of the year, I'm cutting the lawn every other day, it seems, but
Yeah.
it's like July and August. It's so dry and it's not, the grass isn't growing. It's really bizarre.
That's a favorite pastime of mine, cutting the grass. That's how I catch up on my podcasts and listen to
exactly.
music.
Yeah. Well, I do the same. Yeah, I do the same.
Yeah.
But anyway, good stuff. All right. Well, yeah, thanks again for the time as always. It's been another interesting discussion, which I hope people have enjoyed. Hopefully we'll get together again and record another one shortly. Not sure what the subject will be, but we'll pick something from the list. And as I said, if you've got any suggestions, then do keep them coming on the via email or message us on Instagram. Probably is the quickest way of getting a hold of us, because I'm perhaps a bit slack on checking emails and things like that as regularly as perhaps I should. But anyway, you can get in touch with us via Instagram. That's probably the best way, but send us an email if you like. Keep those ideas coming. Let us know what you think of the podcast. Give us any feedback. It's always good to hear what you think of what we've put out there for you. But so thanks for your time, Josh. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Thanks.
You have been listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast. If you have enjoyed the content, then please help us to spread the word by sharing a link on your social media platforms, giving us a like, and leaving us a comment. See you all again next time.